the Second World War, the aeroplane was a highly versatile and efficient weapon. Some of the most iconic machines of the period, such as the Supermarine Spitfire, Focke-Wulf 190, and the Avro Lancaster, were devastatingly effective when deployed in their specific roles. But if there was one aircraft that earned a truly terrifying reputation, it would be the highly feared Junkers Ju-87. As a weapon of World War II, there can be no doubt of its fame and notoriety, with its angular lines, fixed spatted undercarriage, and uniquely cranked inverted gull-winged configuration. This ungainly appearance gave rise to a presence akin to a bird of prey as it swooped down with a deadly accuracy. Throughout its use in the Spanish Civil War, Britain, and the Blitzkrieg campaigns in Poland, France, Norway, and the Soviet Union, the Ju-87 was never far from the front line and utilized to considerable effect. And whilst it was usually perceived as a weapon of the German Luftwaffe, this dive bomber was in fact deployed by several Axis forces, notably by the Italians, Romanians, and Hungarians. I'm Liam Smith with Agent Smith Voice Productions, and in today's history video, I'll be taking a deep dive into one of the most iconic and infamous aircraft of the Second World War, the Junkers Ju-87, better known as the Stuka. Interestingly, the concept of dive bombing didn't originate in Germany. In fact, support for such military philosophies took place during the First World War. Vertical bombing had been originated by the British in 1917. In order to carry out such tests, Germany would have to operate in secret due to the severe restrictions placed by the Treaty of Versailles. By the time the Nazi Party established total power in 1933 and Germany began to rearm, one of the main components for the new German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, was a dive bomber. Thus the Junkers team, under Hermann Pohlmann's leadership, began designing specifications for an all-metal two-seater monoplane dive bomber in the autumn of 1934, and so was born the Ju-87 Stuka. Perhaps the biggest influence on this aircraft was a man named Ernst Udet, the famous World War I ace who flew with Manfred von Richthofen, the Red Baron. In 1931, during his travels to America, Udet witnessed the display of a Curtiss Hawk biplane simulate a bombing run by the United States Navy. He was so impressed by these aircraft that he purchased 2 of them to bring back to Germany for testing. This would later inform the development of the Ju-87 in 1934. Strictly speaking, the name Stuka could have been applied to any Luftwaffe aircraft deployed in a dive bombing capacity, for example the versatile Ju-88, but it was only used exclusively for the Ju-87. The term Stuka is in fact just an abbreviation of the German word Sturzkampfflugzeug, or diving combat aircraft. By the autumn of 1935, the German Luftwaffe was developing its first monoplane dive bomber, perceived as a replacement for the Henschel 123 biplane. The first prototype for the Stuka, the V1, was first flown in 1935. What I find highly fascinating was that the first Ju-87 prototype consisted of a twin-tail configuration. The design was eventually scrapped and a single tail fin was installed after the original prototype crashed, killing both the test pilot and the observer. The aircraft also carried a 2-bladed propeller instead of the conventional 3-bladed propeller, and was powered by a British Rolls-Royce Kestrel engine. This was because the power plant was not ready in time for trials. However, the engine had tendencies to overheat, and thus was eventually replaced by Umo inline engines supplied by Junkers. Some of the most notable features of this warplane were the inverted cranked gull wings, which allowed excellent forward vision, and the fixed spatted undercarriage was specifically designed to make it easier for takeoff and landing. The Stuka carried one main bomb in a cradle under the fuselage, and two smaller bombs mounted under each wing. A viewing window was provided, so that the pilot could see the target and when the bomb swung clear of the propeller's arc. Mounted in each wing were 7.92mm MG-17 machine guns, with one in the rear of the cockpit. Many find the overall appearance of the Stuka to be rather ugly, with its angular lines and robust structure. As an avid aircraft fan, I'd have to disagree with this because I really think it's a truly magnificent flying machine. The main advantage of the Ju-87 was its ability to deliver pinpoint strikes onto a target with deadly accuracy. Traditional heavy bombers remained at high altitude and resorted to horizontal bombing with the assistance of a bomb sight. This device calculated the flight path of the bomb as it fell towards its target, taking in factors such as wind speed, altitude, and the size of the bomb. This method of bombing was sometimes inaccurate, as it was only efficient against static and immobile targets, such as a city or an airfield. But situations demanding pinpoint attacks onto a target during combat required a different aircraft altogether. This is where the Ju-87 comes into play. The Stuka's mode of attack began at 15,000 feet, and the dive angle was between 70 and 80 degrees. However, they were frequently seen diving vertically at 90 degrees. There were two methods of executing the dive bombing procedure, either the peeling off movement, which was achieved by the pilot rolling the aircraft onto its back, pulling the stick back hard, then dropping the nose downward, or he would simply use the nose over approach by pushing the stick forward and going straight down. Sometimes when diving towards the target, the pilot would strafe the ground with his machine guns to give a visible lead in. The speed at which the Stuka dived was a staggering 563 kilometers per hour. The later variants could dive up to 650 kilometers per hour. As the dive bomber plummeted towards the ground, there were two unique devices implemented into the aircraft to assist the pilot. First, there were the dive brakes mounted under each wing, which the pilot would activate before commencing an attack. These would slow the dive and provide the pilot with more time to aim the aircraft towards the target. Second was the hydraulic automatic pull-up, which was a life-saving mechanism as it prevented the Stuka from crashing into the ground. During these death-dealing dives, the Ju-87 structural design and engineering was specifically suited to handle the extreme stress of dive bombing. Pilots handling this aircraft would have to be in peak physical condition, for the human body was less equipped to deal with the forces involved during a dive bombing run. These are known as G-forces and are measured in Gs, the unit used to describe acceleration and the intense strain it inflicts on humans. Imagine yourself on the Superman escape ride at Movie World Queensland. When the roller coaster hurtles towards the ground and recovers, you would experience a maximum of 4.2 G. This would certainly feel uncomfortable, but what would it be like to enjoy dive bombing in the Ju-87? During the tests conducted at Dessau, it was discovered that the highest load a pilot could endure was 8.5 G for 3 seconds when the aircraft was pushed to its limits. At 6 G, 50% of pilots suffered greyouts or seeing stars, with 40% of their vision vanishing altogether at 7.5 G, and sometimes blacking out. As one Stuka pilot stated, "The blood drains from your head and you feel your face change shape. Your cheek muscles and everything else is dragged down. You'd hate to see yourself in the mirror." Some pilots even blacked out for a few seconds. Wouldn't it have just been absolutely exhilarating Strapped into the cockpit of a World War II dive bomber, the sound drowned out by the thunderous roar of the engine and plummeting towards the ground at 563 kilometers per hour. The first Stuka variant to see official combat service with the Luftwaffe was the Ju-87A or Anton. It was powered by a UMO-210D engine and could carry a maximum bomb load of up to 250 kilograms. This model featured a unique heavy trouser-styled undercarriage with an extra inboard support strut outside it. It first saw operational service in the Spanish Civil War as part of the Luftwaffe's Condor Legion, a group of volunteers who were not enlisted military personnel. They went to Spain to assist the fascist nationalists operating under Franco against the communist republicans. 3 of the Ju-87As were sent to Spain, and it was ridiculously effective. It devastated Republican shipping and was highly accurate in destroying targets such as bridges and trains. The Spanish Civil War also saw one of the most infamous uses of the Ju-87. In 1936, during the Siege of Madrid, the city was subject to aerial bombardment, and in 1937, the Stuka was also deployed against Guernica, which gained much controversy because it involved the bombing of a defenseless civilian target. After its role in the Spanish Civil War, the Ju-87A was the basis of a training aircraft for new recruits. The Ju-87A variant was still not the ultimate dive bomber in the Stuka line, and so work began on the next model, the Ju-87B or Bertha. This was the first mass-produced model, and was commissioned into service in 1938. It had a maximum speed of 376 km per hour and featured a more powerful engine, the UMO-211D. It had a completely redesigned radiator, the fixed undercarriage was simpler and thinner, and it could carry a larger bomb load with a single 500 kg bomb or a 250 kg bomb with 2 smaller 50 kg bombs mounted under each wing. Like the previous model, the Ju-87B was deployed in the Spanish Civil War. On the morning of January the 21st, 1939, 3 Ju-87Bs attacked the port of Barcelona, and on the 24th of January, the Stukas prevented the destruction of a bridge near the city by strafing the demolition engineers. The combat effectiveness of the Stuka was so effective that the Germans were determined to prevent any of the aircraft from falling into enemy hands. No nationalist pilot was allowed anywhere near them during the whole of their operational period. Eventually, the Ju-87B was returned to Germany, and the experience from the Spanish Civil War proved invaluable. However, it had not been tested against well-coordinated fighter opposition. This would later come back to haunt the Luftwaffe in the Second World War. By the time of the outbreak of World War II, there were some in the German High Command who still had doubts about the combat use of the Ju-87. However, during the invasion of Poland on September 1, 1939, the Stuka proved its worth yet again. It was devastatingly effective. Performing strikes at the opening of the offensive, it sunk most of the Polish Navy ships and completely decimated ground forces to clear a path for the German panzer divisions. This type of combined mechanized warfare was called Blitzkrieg, lightning war, a tactic devised by Heinz Guderian, in which fast-moving tanks, combined with the infantry, artillery, and air force, worked together to create a sense of overwhelming force and break an enemy's resolve. The most effective victories involved encirclement and speed, and the Stuka was a fundamental component of the Blitzkrieg doctrine. Throughout its use in France, Norway, and the Netherlands, the Ju-87B proved to be highly successful. Its reputation had been fearsome and its success undoubted. For the most part, it was very much at the spearhead of assault, taking out armor, bridges, troop concentrations, and other pinpoint targets with deadly accuracy. However, when the Ju-87B fought during the Battle of Britain, it was embroiled in the bitterest of fighting against an effective air opposition. Whilst the Stuka squadrons suffered heavy losses, they were not catastrophic as many have come to believe. On most Ju-87 strikes, Bf-109 fighter escorts actually held off intercepting RAF fighters, allowing the Stukas to commence their attacks. The aircraft was, however, misused by the Luftwaffe, and while it excelled by attacking shipping in the English Channel, it was often tasked with striking airfields that were not fighter command. The transferal of the Stuka units was done in anticipation of Operation Sea Lion, and not because of unacceptable loss of attrition rates. In reality, much of the Stuka losses were in the Western Campaign than during the Battle of Britain. The problem of range would always affect the Ju-87. After all, it was designed as a short-ranged weapon of war to work in close coordination with infantry. The necessity for striking Allied shipping targets operating off the occupied coasts allowed the B model to be converted into a longer-range variant, the Ju-87R or Richard. The aircraft carried two specialized drop tanks that were mounted under each wing that could be jettisoned once their fuel was used up. Each drop tank carried 295 litres of fuel and extended the range of the Ju-87 to 1,400 kilometres, compared to the traditional B variant, which could only reach 550 kilometres. With this extended range, the Ju-87R was used with considerable success during the Mediterranean, Africa, Yugoslavia, and Greece, wreaking havoc on Allied shipping. On the 10th of January 1941, 25 Stukas severely damaged the British aircraft carrier HMS Illustrious. Throughout the war, the Ju-87 sunk more Allied shipping than any other aircraft, and its use against tanks was second only to the Soviet Sturmovik. The dive bomber had an impact far beyond the damage it could inflict. From its use in the Spanish Civil War, the German High Command realized that the mere sound of the Stuka's approach could strike fear into the hearts of the enemy. Thus, they wanted to capitalize on the terror this aircraft could inflict. Ernst Udet, head of the Luftwaffe's Research and Development Office, came up with a unique device. Upon the leading edges of the fixed undercarriage was fitted a propeller-driven siren called the Jericho Trumpet, a biblical reference in the book of Joshua. True to their name, the sirens bolted onto the fixed undercarriage of the Stuka heralded imminent approach and destruction. When air flowed through the vents, the siren would emit a horrifying, shrieking wail. This infamous and iconic sound has been used many times throughout media to depict an object or plane falling from the sky. But if there was one film that came close to capturing the fear this noise instilled, I think it would be Christopher Nolan's masterpiece, Dunkirk. The opening scene when the Stukas dive-bombed the infantry on the beach was one of the most intense experiences I've ever endured when watching a war film. It truly felt like you were under attack from a squadron of Ju-87 Stukas. These terrifying propeller-driven sirens have become synonymous with the Ju-87 Stuka, and were used to heighten the intimidation of dive bombing and crush the morale of soldiers and civilians. This is a quote from a survivor during the attack on Warsaw. First one plane dived, and then another in an endless chain. All we could think of when we heard that sound was that the bombs were coming. When we heard it for the first time, I think it was the 4th day of the war, the day they first attacked Warsaw. It simply shattered the morale of the entire population. He wasn't wrong. I mean, just listen to this aircraft scream. Whilst the siren was certainly effective, it was not without major drawbacks. It was in fact one of the most hated devices by Stuka pilots, and the early versions of the siren couldn't be turned off. They slowed the plane down by 10 or 20 kilometers of speed, and it also reported the location of the aircraft to the enemy. Many units removed their sirens in 1940, but were sometimes still in use up until 1943. In later variants, the siren could be turned off by an electrical hydraulic clutch. Friedrich Lang, a Stuka pilot with STG-2, stated, "We started the war without sirens in 1939. In April 1940, we had a homemade whistle and siren, but they did not work very well until a specially shaped wooden propeller was fitted to the gear. We did not get supplied by industry until later. They turned in the wind on the dive and created a noise that became louder with speed. The howling noise distracted and upset not only the enemy, but also the crew. It could become better when you could turn it off by the means of a switch." Another feature besides the Jericho trumpet was the whistling bomb, a small device shaped like a pipe organ and comprised of cardboard or a bayonet scabbard. It was attached to the fins of the bombs that would produce the same demoralizing effect as they fell upon their unfortunate targets. This is the terrifying noise in pure authenticity. By 1941, the aging Ju-87 was in need of an upgrade, and with no suitable replacement in sight, this led to the development of the Ju-87D, or Dora. It was powered by a UMO 211J engine, which increased its speed to 410 km per hour and a maximum dive speed of 650 km per hour. To allow room for the new engine, the nose of the aircraft was lengthened, and the entire airframe, along with the wings and undercarriage, was completely redesigned for a more sleeker profile. The Ju-87D was able to carry a significantly heavier bomb load of up to 1,800 kilograms, and it was provided with more specialized weapons and armor protection. Some of the later D variants, such as the D5, included a pair of 20mm MG151 cannons and 3 pairs of twin MG81Z machine gun pods mounted under the wings for ground attack missions. These were also known as the Stuka watering cans. The Ju-87D was used extensively in North Africa and during Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941, taking a huge toll on Soviet forces, breaking up counterattacks of Soviet armor, eliminating strongpoints, and disrupting the enemy's supply lines. A demonstration of the Stuka's effectiveness occurred on the 5th of July 1941, when STG-77 knocked out 18 trains and 500 vehicles. On the 13th of September, Stukas from STG-1 destroyed the railway network in Kiev, as well as inflicting heavy casualties on escaping Red Army columns. for the loss of one Ju-87. The last variant of the Ju-87 Stuka was the Ju-87G, or Gustav, deployed on the Eastern Front in 1943. It featured the same airframe as the Ju-87D, but had the sirens, air brakes, and bomb load removed. Instead, this aircraft was transformed into a beast of a machine, equipped with two 37mm Flak 18 BK Bordkanon. This formidable piece of equipment was devastating in the hands of a competent pilot, and was capable of penetrating 120mm of armor, as shown in this intense archive footage. But while these cannons were powerful, they were large and bulky and added drag, which didn't help since the Stuka was an already slow aircraft. By 1944, most Ju-87s were transferred to night operations, with daylight close support operations being supplemented by ground attack versions of the Focke-Wulf 190. But I cannot finish talking about this variant without mentioning the most highly decorated German serviceman of the Second World War, who by 1944 was still conducting daylight anti-tank operations and commanding the Stuka unit STG-2. This man was Hans-Ulrich Rudel, the famous Stuka ace and the sole recipient of the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross with golden oak leaves, swords and diamonds. Rudel flew 2,530 combat missions and claimed a total of 2,000 targets destroyed, including 800 vehicles, 519 tanks, 150 artillery pieces, and the Soviet battleship Marat. He was shot down at least a dozen times, but not once by an enemy aircraft. He lost his right leg, which was amputated below the knee, and flew the Ju-87 until the last few days of the war, surrendering to the Americans. Rudel survived the war, and in 1948 he moved to Argentina, before returning to Germany in 1953. He also assisted the US Air Force in developing the Fairchild Republic A-10 Thunderbolt II ground attack aircraft, which was introduced in March 1977. He died on the 18th of December 1982, aged 66. In the end, the war would not turn for the Axis powers. By 1943, Germany was on the retreat to Berlin, with the Ju-87 on the defensive and becoming increasingly vulnerable to more modern aircraft. This beast of a machine, considered outdated before 1939, had proven itself to be a highly devastating and effective weapon of war, provided it had sufficient fighter protection and air coverage. For soldiers and civilians who heard the scream of its siren, the Ju-87 would forever remain a symbol of the Blitzkrieg. It was a sound they would never forget. Next time in my history videos, I'll be discussing the iconic and beautiful British Supermarine Spitfire. Thank you so much as always for watching. I really enjoy making these videos. And don't forget to give us a like and to subscribe for more content. Finally, to my awesome subscribers, your contribution and ongoing support has been so helpful, it really means the world to me. Liam Smith with Agent Smith Voice Productions. Until then, stay tuned. I'll see you next time.